I'm trying to make sure my head's not cut off. Anyway, this is a story about Stonehenge. And before I get started, I wanted to say thanks for looking at this video. And if you like it, do hit the like button on the YouTube channel. Thanks. It's an interesting thing because you never know who's watching them and if any of this makes any sense to anybody. So the only way we have to measure is just if you hit like. So please do that. Stonehenge, I went to the UK a couple of times. The first time was in 1968, and I went with my high school friend. And we toured around there. We went down and camped down on the Salisbury Plain, and then basically hitchhiked over to the Stonehenge, which was just out in a field. And we walked up, I think we walked up a dirt road, and there was a school bus group there. And we had lunch with them on some of those flat stones. Later, I went back with Dr. Henrietta Mann for a sunrise, which was it was quite beautiful. A number of people went with us, and I had gone just a couple of years earlier, and I was amazed at the difference. I went with my brother, and he was so funny because we walked a path around, and he's, sprinkled tobacco everywhere. It was quite funny. But when I went with Dr. Mann, we actually were given a permit, and we went inside the circle and did. Dr. Mann did a sunrise for us. Why I talk about Stonehenge is actually, it leads into something that's real important right now, I believe, and it's about identity. No, I don't have any connection with Stonehenge at all. I don't know anything about it. There was a new article that came out recently that talked about that over where the stones were harvested for Stonehenge, there was a site that seemed to have been disturbed there that might have been a Stonehenge beforehand. And I thought about that, and I thought, gosh, if I was transporting all of those big stones from one place to another, I would want to make sure that the stones were perfect before I moved them. And so, yeah, I would stage them. So I think what they found over there is probably the staging area, but I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen it and don't know much except what I read. And that brings us to this question that I wanted to talk about. Stonehenge is a good example because, we weren't there when it was built. So a lot of it's just our, imagination and dreams and some stories handed down, but, the true fact is we don't know a lot about what happened to begin the ceremony of Stonehenge. And while I was with Dr. Mann, I was thinking about how much work was gone into, to put this piece together. And I came to realize, that, to get human beings dedicated like that, you need a focus, some kind of a focusing. And what so often I hear in religion or in spiritual talk is, the center, and you need to find your identity. You need to find your center. And I think about that quite a bit because I remember this talk is going to kind of be in three kind of categories. It's going to be kind of religion and spirituality and science. And I do all of them, actually. And so I think a person who believes in science can be a spiritualist and have a religion. I think that can be. But then there are those individuals that have taken and separated those out and said, no, religion is dysfunction and spiritualism is dysfunction and science is a whole different thing. And I think at some point science got into, I don't believe spiritualistics and I don't believe religious fanatics and I don't believe those guys, so show me your facts. And so that's when science really isolated itself. And I think if it hadn't happened, we might know more about why Stonehenge is what it is. But as it is, we don't know. And so we turn into, our systems of belief, who knows and who doesn't know, and it gets down to those separations to a church, an organization, a spiritualist who just prays, and science. Science wants the fact. And sometimes religion and spiritualism can't produce a fact for science, and so that's why science turns around and says it doesn't, believe in those things. But the problem with science is the lack of allowing spiritualism to come in more. And the way we teach it so often throughout indigenous communities, and I relate to the indigenous communities more than I do to the non-indigenous communities, simply because I was brought up by indigenous people, and I didn't know any different for a long time. But I also like what the Quakers have to say about the light, and I think that's a good path for people to be on. But it is a path of prayer, and that will take you to the center. But will it solve the identity of an individual? Can science, the fact of you were brought up by, you're related to such and such, and I'm full-blood this, or I'm a half-breed this, or I'm a mixed relation family, multi-generation, multiracial, multi-cultural family. Then whose identity do I actually grab? And that's where I look at Stonehenge, and I was thinking, I would imagine our ancient, from the Americas, our ancient ancestors would have looked at that, and they would have probably understood exactly what Stonehenge was. I would also have to say, when I was at Stonehenge, we were there at sunrise, and I thought about how beautiful the sky must have been then, and how close the stars were, how clean the sky was. But that's the spiritualist person in me. The scientist, I'm looking for, gosh, how did these things get here? And what's the logistics? So, I as a person, I look into these two categories. But it really bases it down to, in this moment, who are you? And that brings us to a really interesting term. It's called point of origin. And Stephen Hawkins, I think it was, I'll paraphrase, but Stephen Hawkins, I believe, said something once about when asked, and I don't remember when, but he was asked about his knowledge of the universe. Where would be the center? Would it be at the origin of the Big Bang? Is there a center of the universe? And I believe his answer was, it's everywhere. Meaning, in my language, is we all are the center of the universe. As stories go and talk about, indigenous storytelling, there's some science in what they say about, how these different directions were set up, or, how the sun came to be, how the moon came to be. There is science in there, and so often we look to storytelling to answer some of our questions. But you have to realize at this point, some of our storytelling, we didn't collect all of the stories that needed to be collected, and so we have lost some of that connection. But identity, and I think about Stonehenge from time to time. I got a coin once there, and I gave it to Henrietta, Dr. Mann, as a memory from that moment. But when we were inside the circle, those birds, there were these birds, and they kept squeaking and squeaking. I often tried to remember. I think those birds were there when I was there in '68. At least their offspring. So this was sort of wandering around again, but it was sort of centered on the idea that what happens with Stonehenge is you get a group of people focused in a positive direction. Let's connect to a greater thing, and we'll need big things to do that. And so they come together, and they. I in my mind, I see the tribes. They come together, and somebody's had a vision, a great vision, and they all talk about this, a great thing. And so coming together to go and have this structure built from the great vision. It's a magnificent story. If you can make up anything, and that's the problem. So often in spirituality, people misinterpret some of the activities or things that have been, coming or being revealed. And what I have to say is that my experience is that if we call it the medicine, if you have the medicine, heaven forbid for you, your life is tragic. If you're going to follow the path to the center, which is what I did, if you're going to follow the path to the center, the only way to get there is to go to prayer, is through prayer. And realizing that this is a tough journey, it's a tough journey. But it tells you about the world you're within, all these people out there that are having a tough journey. And it would be really a good thing if we had a great vision like Stonehenge and we built a great monument to whatever it is that, a vision like that is sent by. You're getting down to the science of facts. I think sometimes that dries out a student seeking discovery in the world of nature, especially when we just dwell on temperatures and readings and data. They do that in the lab, but can you actually go out and listen to the birds sing the song? Then that's where you have now you come to the center, the point of origin is if you look at the environment, where is the environment? The environment starts, in most cases, we're told in our youth that our skin protects us from the environment. And so the environment starts at skin level. Now, where does nature start? A lot of people consider nature starting outside the door. But I consider nature inside the house too. And so I consider nature and the environment the same thing. And so what happens is you have to rethink, the little categories you've been taught in on how you visualize spirituality and science. Because in the native perspective, those things are the same. But where indigenous peoples and the society, the Great Society, where they miss is that the indigenous people trust their faith. And a lot of the society has to be talked into their faith. So we generally look at the signs and we follow the path and we hope we are in the light. And we hope for the best for our families and everybody else. But our families is where, again, where science breaks down, because science, says, you are homogeneous or Homo erectus or Homo sapien, or you're an alligator, or you're a turtle. But the way I perceived it is that we came from the same instant in the universe, which was the Big Bang. We're all made of the same material. It's just that we were arranged differently by the DNA. And so when they say the family, I see the family as nature. Whereas when other people say family, they're only thinking of mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and their brothers and sisters, children. In the way I understood it, from the way people taught me, we were all related meant that we were related to everything in the universe, which meant that we had a responsibility to keep the universe in shape, or to keep it in order. And that's why we sound the alarms on oil, and we sound the alarms on our water and our health, because that's what we're supposed to do. And we were given an agreement that we were to trust that if we said this was going to happen, if we were asking for help would come. But in my years, I haven't seen a lot of that happen. We've seen a lot of the people, especially in the native communities that I've gone to, a lot of them, they struggle considerably. It was because the dominant society came in and said, you're going to get educated. And the chiefs, they said in their treaties, we wanted to be educated. And so the problem in the resolve was that the dominant society said, our education is the only education important. And the chiefs and the signers of the treaties, they were kind of thinking that traditional science, or the traditional knowledge and the white knowledge, or the dominant knowledge, would be combined, but it wasn't. It was the traditional knowledge in a lot of cases was removed from the natives' educational fruit baskets, let's say. Some people survived, and so where do we come from? Getting back to Stonehenge, what are we saying as we resolve? The resolve is that we're in this moment, and this is our moment. And do you want to get to prayer? Or if you want to get to the center, you need to use your prayers. And do rely on your facts. Don't wander around in blind faith, but rather in the knowledge of the sanctuary where you've gone. So this is a talk about spiritualism, and it was a talk about religion and science. And I just wanted to share this because it seems like right now so many people in the pandemic seem to be lost, and maybe religion isn't giving them the sanctuary asylum that they want or they need. And so maybe if they would be open enough, they should look into the world of science and spiritual work, naturalism, and the environment, and become more involved and be part of the environment instead of apart from the environment. We welcome everyone to join in to try to prevent disasters such as climate change. And there I've said the words. Anyway, I wanted to share this. I've done it a couple of times in different ways. I don't know if this will survive or not, but have a good evening. Because now it's evening.